My problem with President Trump, and I think the problem you're seeing from the citizens of this country when you mention those numbers and what's happening is they see chaos every day. They wake up in the morning and they see a mean tweet.
So Amy Klobuchar, 2020 Democratic presidential candidate and very much a centrist in terms of in this Democratic primary. She's also a senator from Minnesota. She ended up going on to CNN to talk to Jake Tapper, who for most progressives is unbearable. But she went on there to talk with him about Trump's economy, among other things. But this segment is mainly about her talking with him about the economy. And then she also managed to say something super corny and super stupid and super establishment minded at the very end there as part of her argument against Trump's economy. And Jake Tapper is waffling around too, making it sound like everything about the economy right now under Donald Trump is amazing. So also, just before I get to the video clip, I just want to plug myself for 1 second here. I'm going to milk it. It's my birthday. I'm turning 26 today. So if you guys could just share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, hit the bell so that way you're notified when I put out new videos, and just share it to anybody that's your friend that's on the left or progressive at all, or just into politics in general. So I would greatly appreciate that. It would be an amazing gift for my birthday if I ended up getting over 1,000 subscribers today, because that means the channel is officially monetized. And if you do want to donate to the show as well, just go to Venmo, SeanCassella, SeanCassella, and that is greatly appreciated as well, because we are fully funded by the fans of the show, and it will continue to be that way. So watch and enjoy Amy Klobuchar and Jake Tapper being completely clueless about the economy on CNN.
Senator Klobuchar, let's start with the strong economic news out on Friday. The economy added more than 250,000 jobs, better than economists expected. Unemployment is at its lowest level in almost 50 years. Wages grew faster than prices did. Do you give President Trump the credit?
I give our workers and our businesses the credit, Jake. When you're out there across the country, you see people working harder and harder every day. And this has meant that our businesses are strong and we're selling American goods. That being said, a lot of people aren't sharing in this prosperity because of the cost of college, the cost of health care, the fact that the president had promised that he would bring down the prices of their prescription drugs, and that just hasn't happened. So when you get out there and you see the energy out there and the concern, talk to farmers who are trying to sell their soybeans. There is people out there that are not sharing in this economic prosperity, and it's not fair, and it's not the American way. So while we attribute a lot of this to our workers and to our businesses, we know we can do better as a country.
Unemployment is the lowest it's been since I was 9 months old. You're really not going to give President Trump any credit for that in terms of his tax cuts or deregulation or anything he's done?
You know what I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about when we were in that downturn and President Obama came into office, and he had to deal with that with the Congress to try to, one, right the financial industry, and then, two, get us on the road to recovery. And I remember that the Republicans were giving him grief when he took any credit for that. So I think that we have had policies in place, starting with President Obama, that have aided that recovery. But what I believe is that we should be governing from opportunity and not chaos. And my problem with President Trump, and I think the problem you're seeing from the citizens of this country when you mention those numbers and what's happening is they see chaos every day. They wake up in the morning and they see a mean tweet, or they see some inconsistent policy that causes chaos during the day. They want to have a leader that their kids can look up to.
That last part of the clip was unbearable about the mean tweet thing. I'm sure most of these people, since you're progressive, you've seen Kyle Kulinski's show, Secular Talk, and he always talks about how Donald Trump is basically an establishment Republican on policy, but he just has the mean tweets. And that's what the establishment Democrats and most of the other people in the establishment, even a lot of establishment Republicans, don't like, is that Donald Trump is just more outrageous than they are. He still does similar policies to what they want, but at the same time, he's doing all these ridiculous tweets. He's saying ridiculous things. He's going after people in a mean and vicious way. So that's the stuff they hate. They don't hate the policies nearly as much as they hate this mean tweeting and calling people names and making up demeaning nicknames for other people. That's all the stuff that drives them insane. And for Amy Klobuchar to pull that into the economy argument, well, it's like, hey, yeah, the economy's okay, but it came from Obama. And she did make a decent point in the beginning about the fact that, yes, the economy, in terms of the unemployment numbers, is great and the amount of jobs added, but that's not the full picture to the economy. And there's plenty of stuff involving the cost of healthcare, the cost of college tuition, the cost of childcare that does really affect working class and middle class people. And that is a major part in terms of how well people are doing in the United States of America, not just the unemployment number. And a lot of people are underemployed, where their wages aren't nearly as high as they should be, and they're not able to afford things like healthcare and college tuition, and be able to go to better schools and things of that nature. So keep in mind that she is somewhat accurate there, but she then gives no specifics on the policy prescriptions to solve those things, which is strike one, because you should then be... She doesn't support these progressive policies, but even if she's saying a public option, all right, a public option is better than what we have now. So even if she was going for that, then she could at least say, hey, like, well, healthcare cost is a big thing and we need to do a public option, and kind of go into detail about that and hit Jake Tapper with some facts. But instead, she did not do that. She ended up just saying, hey, it's healthcare and college tuition and things of that nature are still very high and are continually getting more expensive for people. So it is definitely very much a part of the picture in terms of how people are doing in this U.S. economy, that they can actually afford healthcare and they can actually afford college tuition without going into debt, and are not being suffocated by previously earned student loan debt, and they can actually afford to send their child to daycare. So these are all things that are important. So she somewhat touches on it, but in a milquetoast way where she doesn't really hammer her point across to Jake Tapper, and I don't think you would convince many people that oppose what she's saying to then come onto her side solely by her just saying that little snippet. So she needed to do more there. She needed to hammer it with the facts, and she needed to offer policy prescriptions on why those things can be solved and how we can make the economy better by doing those policies for average, like, working class and regular people. So she didn't go into the specifics on how do we solve those things that are actually a big part in terms of how people are doing economically in the country. And then the second part, then she just goes to the mean tweet thing. And I'm like, oh my God, the mean tweet thing. Why would you say that? It's like she watched the secular talk videos and watched progressives saw progressives on Twitter talking about stuff like that and was like, you know what? I think it will be funny if I go out there and say the mean tweet thing. Like, you have to be joking to go for the mean tweet thing as part of the reason that you would be a better option and that Democrats would be a better option for Americans in terms of how the economy's doing. So she didn't back up the first part with enough facts. She didn't really hammer that part home. She came out milquetoast on that part, even though she was on the right track. And then she goes out there and just completely blows it with the mean tweet thing and makes herself seem like the corniest, most establishment-minded, out-of-touch politician of all time, which she isn't really far off from that in real life. She's very centrist. She's very much an establishment Democrat, and she thinks like an establishment Democrat. And she's been unapologetically centrist ever since she entered the race, and even when she was a senator before she ever even did enter the race. So Amy Klobuchar, if you're on the left and you're progressive, you don't even want to consider supporting her. She's not good at answering these questions because she doesn't have the progressive mindset to really talk about the issues and give concrete policy prescriptions on how to solve those issues when Jake Tapper gives her some bullshit question like that. Because don't get me wrong, Jake Tapper, that question is such bullshit in the way that it's framed. So Jake Tapper could say something about the unemployment rate and still not end up going completely into the thing where she's like, he's grilling her. You're not going to give Donald Trump credit for that? This is the best in 50 years. This is unbelievable. So, like, calm down, Jake Tapper. Stop drooling over the unemployment rate. For one damn second, get out of the establishment bubble and look at what the other factors are in the economy that are holding people down. People aren't unemployed that much, but people are underemployed. And then also, on top of that, the same argument goes for the same argument that Republicans gave to Barack Obama when he was in office, when the unemployment numbers were going down. You also have to look at plenty of other factors for why the unemployment is so low. and a lot of people aren't giving up their jobs, there's technically a natural unemployment number that should be a little bit higher, honestly, than 3.6%, because people will be leaving their jobs to find better jobs or taking time off to maybe take care of their kids if they are financially secure enough to do so. But right now, there aren't enough people in the country that are financially secure to do so. So that actually, there is a part of the unemployment rate that is technically positive a lot of the time. And so Jake Tapper doesn't address all of that. It has to be this black and white thing, 3.6%, best in 50 years, or the best since 1969, which is 50 years, but whatever. I just wanted to get the date in there. And then he just goes on and grilling her. So you're not going to give Donald Trump credit for that? Or you're going to be that partisan? No, it's not about being partisan, Jake. It's about actually knowing what you're talking about and knowing that there are plenty of other factors, except for just the unemployment number, that go into how well Americans are doing. Working class and middle class Americans depend on all of these other things as well. They depend on wages going up. It's a substantial amount. And 0.6%, the amount that they went up in this newest report, that's not enough to make up that's not enough to make up for people's wages being stagnant since the 70s. It's just not the case. So Jake Tapper's off in his bubble, Amy Klobuchar's off in her bubble, and it's just an establishment-minded drool fest on one side and an establishment-minded half-hearted defense on the other side. So it's all establishment bubble talk, it's all out of touch, and they're not doing discourse in this country a favor by not going into the details of what actually affect average Americans outside of just the unemployment number. So I think that's very important. And then also, just while I have you here, let's go to this article from truthout.org. I do like this website for a lot of different news articles, so I suggest you check it out if you have not before. But they put out an article about the Trump economy report, and here's what they say. Recent economic reports have President Donald Trump crowing. The big headline numbers do sound encouraging. The unemployment rate is down to 3.6%, the lowest since 1969. Average earnings are finally outpacing inflation. The stock market has been hitting record highs, and the first quarter of 2019 had the fastest annualized growth, 3.2%, since 2015. And yet, most of the gains from our growing economy are still going to those who least need a boost. Stock market rallies, for example, further concentrate wealth among the very richest Americans. The top 1% of Americans own more than half of stocks and mutual funds. The bottom 90% own just 7%. So that is already part of it. And then let me just scroll down for you here. And for ordinary Americans, a slight uptick in wages is not enough to make up for many years of stagnation. Average hourly pay rose just 6 cents in April 2019 and 4 cents the month before that. Workers need a much bigger raise if they are to receive their fair share of the economic gains, especially with prices for many essentials rising much faster than wages. For example, compared to 3.2% increase in average earnings over the past year, spending on prescription drugs is up 7.1%, while the average house price rose 5.7%. Average child care costs jumped 7.5% between 2016 and 2017. Such small pay increases won't do much to chip away at the country's $1.6 trillion in student debt, a burden leading to 1 in 15 borrowers to consider suicide, according to a recent survey. Wages have also lagged far behind the increase in corporate profits, 7.8% in 2018. So there you have it. I'll put the link to this article in the description box below as well. So yes, neither did Amy Klobuchar, like I said, was on the right track. She almost was there, but she didn't have the details. She didn't have the facts behind it. And she didn't come in there ready to hit hard on what those facts are and why the economy is still not working for working class and a lot of middle class Americans. So, I mean, all of those things. The 3.2 increase in average earnings over the past year, that's great. But spending on prescription drugs is up 7.1%. While the average house price rose 5.7%, average child care costs jumped 7.5% in 2016 and 2017. So the rates of these costs are going up far more than the rate of these wages. So people are still having their cost of living go up, and the amount of money that they have to shell out to be able to live a decent life, all those things are getting more and more expensive. And even though their wages are growing, they're not growing enough to make up for the amount that these things are growing in terms of their cost. So Jake Tapper, not a mention of this, solely just hammering on the unemployment rate and saying since 1969. So we already knew Jake Tapper was terrible. We already knew CNN was terrible. And does CNN do okay here and there? Sure. But we already know all of the hosts that are talking on there, the way they frame things is all establishment minded. Everything they report on is establishment minded, and it's nauseating, and it's beyond frustrating. And Amy Klobuchar is just a centrist Democrat that has no chance to win the 2020 Democratic primary. She doesn't motivate voters at all to go out and vote for her because she has such a watered down platform, and she doesn't hit back even nearly well enough. She doesn't even hit on any numbers of those things that I just gave you to really paint the picture for people that are watching that show to say, you know what, she's right. There is actually a lot more cost that I'm dealing with now, and everything's growing more and more expensive at a rate faster than my wages are going up and other people's wages are going up. And that the 3.6% of unemployment does not all of a sudden mean that people aren't underemployed anymore and that people can't afford health care and they can't afford unexpected expenses and they can't afford college tuition and they can't afford to pay off their student loan debt. So all of those things are very, very important when you're talking about the economy in the United States. And does Jake Tapper, Amy Klobuchar talk about any of them? Amy Klobuchar barely, and then of course not for Jake Tapper.